Saint Charbel was a 19th-century monk who lived and died in Lebanon, in the mountain region where the country's famous cedars grow. Like most Lebanese Christians, he was a Maronite Catholic, a member of one of the great Eastern churches, which has been in union with Rome since its beginnings in the late 4th century. Charbel Makhlouf was born on May 8, 1828. He was the fifth child of Antoine Zerar Makhlouf and Brigida Shidiak. The family lived in the rural village of Beka Kafra, high in the Lebanese mountains. At baptism, he received the name of Yusef, or Joseph. They were devout Maronite Catholics whose relatives included priests and monks. As was the custom among Maronite Catholics, the children knelt and repeated their mother's prayers before the small home altar at day's end. During this time, Lebanon was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. As he grew, Yusef was drawn to the examples of the lives of the saints and to the life of a hermit. Yusef shepherded his family's small flock of animals when he was young. In a small grotto near where the sheep grazed, young Yusef placed an icon of the Blessed Virgin. In the peaceful solitude, he would pass the day in prayer. The other boys of the village ironically began to call the place the Grotto of the Saint. After his father died, Yusef worked for his uncle in the fields, while his mother made plans for him to marry and have a family. In 1851, at age 23, Yusef left home unannounced to join the Lebanese Maronite order. It did not take long for his family and friends to notice his absence. His mother and other relatives, learning of his whereabouts, tried many times to persuade him to return. Yusef's only response was emphatic: "God wants me entirely for himself." Yusef took on the domestic works of the monastery, including baking bread, cultivating the land, making shoes, mending and washing clothes, and working as a carpenter. In due time, he made his religious profession and took the name Charbel after a 2nd century martyr from Antioch, a city not far from Lebanon. He took the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience at St. Maroon's Monastery in Anaya, Mount Lebanon. With these vows, he gave up the future of a wife and children and promised to never take any possessions for his own. He was next sent to another monastery to study theology. Here, Charbel proved himself as an excellent student and an exemplar of sanctity. After 6 years of study, he was ordained a priest on July 23, 1859. He lived the next 16 years in the St. Maroon's Monastery. As a young priest, he was witness to the appalling massacre of over 20,000 Christians in the next few years. Hundreds of refugees, hungry and terrified by what had happened and might yet happen, sought shelter in the monastery of Anaya. Charbel rendered every possible assistance to the refugees, all the while praying and fasting. The piety of Father Charbel could not be confined to the monastery, and word soon spread of his deep devotion and self-mastery. One day, when a group of monks were working in the field, they found a very dangerous snake. The monks and the villagers tried their best to get rid of the snake, but it simply didn't leave. One of the monks approached Father Charbel and told him about the incident. He calmly went to the field and asked the snake to go away and never return. The snake immediately obeyed and slithered away. On another occasion, swarms of locusts began to plague the area, endangering the crops. Father Charbel once again calmly approached the pests and commanded their departure. The locusts left immediately, and the harvest was spared, making the farmers relieved. For many years, Father Charbel decided to become a hermit, but the prior always refused his request. Father Charbel was already spending a great deal of the night in prayers, and the prior worried this would affect his health. Prior also ordered the young men in charge of the oil not to give any more to him. When Charbel asked for more oil the next day, they pulled a trick on him and gave him plain water. Unaware of this trick, Charbel lit his lantern as usual and began to pray. The young men ran to inform the prior. The prior immediately investigated the incident and realized the hand of God in this miraculous event. He granted Charbel permission to enter their nearby hermitage of Saints Peter and Paul in February 1875. And there he stayed, alone, isolated, mortified, poor, reflective, and silent for the next 23 years. In Christian solitary confinement, willingly separating himself from the world so he could more easily attach himself to Christ. He ate 1 meal per day, performed manual labor, observed continuous silence, and slept no more than 5 hours per night on the ground with a log as his pillow. Father Charbel's obedience became legendary, his angelic chastity encompassing his whole being, and his poverty going to extremes not reached by many other saints. In 1898, after 23 years of prayer and penance as a hermit, he died of a stroke at the age of 70 while saying the Divine Liturgy. He slumped to the floor with the Holy Eucharist still in his hands. His brother monks buried him in a common tomb without a casket, as was customary for the order. A short time after his burial, his fellow monks and nearby villagers noticed an extraordinary light coming from his tomb. The light shone for 45 days, and word quickly spread near and far. The monks soon sought ecclesiastical permission to exhume the body. This was done in the spring of 1899, 4 months after Charbel's death. They discovered that his body was in perfect condition, and he was transferred into a special coffin. Many traveled from distant countries in anticipation of a cure or favor. In just 2 years after exhuming the body of Father Charbel, the monastery had collected 1,200 reports of miracles. Since his death over a century ago, Saint Charbel has taken his place among the greatest miracle workers of the Church. Over and over again, Saint Charbel works wonders when the circumstances seem impossible. In the many dire circumstances we face today, no worldly solution can be found. For our own needs and those of so many others, let us invoke the powerful help of Saint Charbel with confidence.